Hello, pattern readers. Here it is, the final installment of the Great Hunt reread. If you missed my community post, then the reason why this is coming out later than I anticipated is because I'm in quarantine. Now, the good news is no one in my household is sick right now. But if things in the schedule for the channel are a little bit off over the next couple of weeks, that is why. Wanted you to be aware. But I am excited to talk about the ending of the Great Hunt. So let's get into the chapters. Chapter 47. The grave is no bar to my call. Rand and Huron join Mat and Perrin, and Rand explains to the others that Ingtar is sacrificing himself so that they can escape with the horn. It pains Rand to gallop away and leave Ingtar shouting, "The light," and Shinawa. But he thinks of his duties. He tells the others that he is going back for Egwene, and Mat says he cannot leave Egwene to the Shan-Chan either. Perrin points out that the Shan-Chan soldiers, along with Suldam and Damani, are lined up in one direction, and Huron shows them that there are white cloaks in the other direction. They are about to be caught in a battle. Rand thinks urgently of getting back to Egwene, and Mat decides that nothing says the Horn of Valyr can't be used before the last battle. He blows a clear, golden note, and fog begins to rise. Jeffrey Bornhald hears the note and sees the fog. He feels the ground near him exploding. He orders the Legion to charge and thinks with regret that Bayar will not be able to tell his son how he died. Rand suddenly sees Falme from multiple perspectives at once. The city hangs beneath him, but it also hovers over his head. He can see white cloaks charging and dying. He can see anxious men on ships, including Baal Doman. Figures start to emerge out of the fog, men and women that he recognizes, the heroes of the Horn, and he can put hundreds of names to each of them. The man at their head is Artur Hawkwing. Hawkwing greets Rand as Luz Theron. Rand tells him that they must drive back the Shan-Chan invaders and rescue a girl. Hawkwing agrees to fight for him, but something holds him in place, and he asks Rand for the banner. Rand produces the dragon banner, and Perrin chops a sapling to make a pole. Rand charges forward with Mat blowing the horn and Perrin waving the banner, the heroes and Huron with them. Suddenly, Ba'alzamon appears before him, and he and Rand are alone. Rand continues to be aware of the battle that precedes, even as he faces Ba'alzamon. He is filled with saidin, and he tells Ba'alzamon to get out of his way. He is not there for him. He is shocked to find that Ba'alzamon thinks that he sounded the horn. Ba'alzamon keeps trying to recruit him, even as Rand attacks with his sword. Rand notices that he acts like the sword can hurt him. Rand thinks of Lan and Ingtar and Egwene, and he makes his decision. He forms the position of Heron waiting in the rushes, inviting Ba'alzamon to strike him. He tells Ba'alzamon that in 1,000 lives he has never served him, and Ba'alzamon attacks with his staff at Rand's side, and Rand strikes Ba'alzamon in the heart with his Heron-mark sword. Chapter 48. First Claiming. Min makes her way through the chaotic streets alone, feeling something pull her on. She can see the spray leaving the harbor, but she does not blame Baal Doman. She wonders if she really just saw Brigitte Silverbow and Artur Hawkwing. She finds Rand sprawled unconscious and pulls the melted sword out of his hand and inspects his wounds. She finds a brand of a heron on his palm, cuts and bruises, but worst of all, a cauterized, icy wound on his side. She grumbles as she pulls him into a nearby house and into a bed, piling him with blankets, lighting a fire in the hearth. She holds him under the blankets to try to give him warmth and studies his face, and wonders aloud why the pattern caught her up with him. Egwene enters, and Min feels embarrassed, as if she has to explain herself. Egwene says she felt Rand pulling her too, as did Elaine. Elaine and Nynaeve are getting horses, including Bella. Egwene asks Min if she knows what Rand is now, and Min says she does, but also he's hurt and maybe Nynaeve can help him. Egwene persists, telling Min that Rand is not safe for anyone to marry, but Min says to speak for herself. And why should Egwene care if Min picks him up after she tossed him away for the White Tower? Egwene stares at Min for a long time and then leaves, saying she will send Nynaeve. Min talks aloud to Rand about her viewings, about how there's a third woman yet to come who will also love him, and wonders which he will choose, or maybe all three of them. An astoundingly beautiful woman with black hair, dressed in white and silver, enters and calls Rand Lews Therin, the Dragon Reborn. She ignores Min and talks aloud about how she controls events and she will shape him. Min asks again who she is, and the woman responds, "I am called Lanfear Girl." Min gapes, and Lanfear leaves her, telling her to tend Lews Therin well until she comes for him. Min holds tight to Rand. Child Byar gallops out of Falme, preparing to tell Dain Bornhald and Pedron Niall that the entire Legion, including Jeffrey Bornhald, are dead because of dark friends like Perrin of the Two Rivers, who betrayed them. Chapter 49, What Was Meant to Be. Rand wakes to pain in his side and sees Min beside him. She tells him they are 5 days east of Falme. Rand wants to know if they, meaning Mat and Perrin, freed Egwene, and Min says no, she did, along with Nynaeve and Elaine. Egwene, Nynaeve, Elaine, Mat, Huron, and Verin are all already gone on their way to Tar Valon. Rand is disappointed that Egwene did not even wait until he awoke. He feels for the wound at his side, and Min stops him, saying that Verin said healing didn't work the way that it should, although Moiraine is sure that Nynaeve must have done something to him before he got to Verin. Moiraine appears as her name is spoken. Rand tells her to go back to hiding, and she says she's been doing what she could. Rand accuses her of sending Verin after him, which she denies. Moiraine asks if Rand encountered Fain, and Rand realizes that he failed to confront him. Moiraine does not know where Fain has gone, but she believes him to be even more dangerous when he encountered Mordeth in Shadar Logoth and merged with it. Rand vows to go after Fain, but when he pulls his sword and sees that it is destroyed, he remembers killing Baalzamon. Moiraine says the Dark One is not so easily killed, but says that he and Rand appeared in the sky over Falme as they fought, and everyone saw it. She shows him a drawing by a street artist and says they are everywhere. Moiraine says he needs her more than ever, and he denies it and says he will not be the dragon and tear everything apart. She says he is already and mentions the civil war in Cairhien. She shows him 2 more crumbling seals on the Dark One's prison. There are only 4 left, and the dragon will be the world's only hope when the Dark One does break free. Rand gets up and makes his way out to the camp with Min and Moiraine's help. He sees Perrin and Loial, who affirm their friendship and their intention to stay with him. The dragon banner is waving, and the Shanaran soldiers all take knee and pledge their oath to him. Moiraine says that Rand must choose, but the world will be broken again, with or without him. Rand thinks of Lan's words. Death is lighter than a feather, duty heavier than a mountain. And he makes his choice. Chapter 50. After. The tale of Falme spreads widely, ever changing in the details, but with one part always the same. The man whose face had been seen in the sky above Falme, and who now rides under the banner of the Dragon Reborn. Men proclaim themselves for him, and others strike them down, and are struck down in return. The remainder of this video contains spoilers for the entire Wheel of Time series. If you do not want to be massively spoiled, stop here or proceed at your own risk. Okay, let's talk for a moment about why Rand appears in the sky over Falme with Baalzamon. Before we know that that happened, we see that Rand is seeing Falme, seeing the battle from multiple perspectives at once, which is just trippy. But it does seem to sort of line up with this because one of the perspectives is of Falme floating beneath him. It also coincides with Mat blowing the horn and the fog rolling in. This is something that is really never explained. Though Robert Jordan did say that Rand and Ishamael were not physically in the sky and that their image did appear in other places as well. So did the horn do this somehow? Was it the pattern ensuring that Rand would become known for who he was and that false dragons would be set aside? It's really unclear. I will say there does seem to be some link between the Dragon Reborn and the Horn of Voliere, because Hawkwing cannot fight for Rand until he sees the dragon banner. This justifies Moiraine's belief that Rand's life might depend on the banner, and it's also a huge hint that the idea in circulation that the heroes of the Horn could be called to serve for the Shadow or anyone in the last battle if they had a hold of the Horn, well, that's just not true. Hawkwing even says, "We have come to the Horn, but we must follow the banner and the dragon." It's like, why would he wait for that and say that if he could have fought for just anyone? Plus, there's also clearly a link in the sense that the two battles mirror each other. When Rand advances and Ba'alzamon retreats, then the heroes advance and the Shan-Chan retreat, and vice versa. There's a little moment where Hawkwing says to Huron that the wheel sometimes adds to their number, and that Huron might someday find a place among the heroes of the Horn. I can't say that this is foreshadowing because it's outside of the scope of the series, but it's still a little detail that I love. Here you have a hero recognizing the incredible bravery in a humble man and perhaps giving him the boost he needs to face what is before him. Rand has a couple of realizations that Ba'alzamon is not invincible here as he faces him. Number one, he does not realize that Mat blew the horn and assumes that Rand did it. Number two, he acts like Rand's sword can hurt him, and it can. But Rand still clings to this ridiculous idea that somehow you're going to kill the Dark One with a sword. Moiraine later tries to disabuse him of that notion by telling him, of course, you're not going to be able to kill the Dark One that way. But she still says she thinks it was the Dark One with Rand in the sky. And I have to wonder here, does she really think that, or does she just not want to reveal her thoughts? It seems a bit surprising to me that it hasn't at least occurred to her at this point that it might be one of the Forsaken. When Min is talking to an unconscious Rand, it becomes clearer that her visions have shown her that she would love Rand and Egwene would not. But she still specifically mentions 3 who would love him. And it's not hard to figure out that Elaine is one of these. But Min also says there is a 3rd yet to come that Egwene does not know. This is foreshadowing for Aviendha, of course, but we don't have much to go on here. I did find it a bit odd that Nynaeve did not feel Rand pulling on her the way that Egwene and Elaine and Min did. We know that Nynaeve is also tied to Rand in her own way, so the distinction here seems to be about a certain type of love. Yet we know that romantic love is not in the future for Egwene and Rand, but maybe their current attachment is enough for this moment. When Lanfear appears and names herself, this should be confirmation of Celene's identity because of the description. However, I'll just acknowledge that because it isn't completely spelled out, there might have still been some who did not make that connection yet. Rand accuses Moiraine of sending Varen after him, and if we recall, Varen herself said that Moiraine sent her when she first caught up with Ingtar's party. I've mentioned this before, but it's worth talking about again because it's at this point where we're really introduced to the idea that Varen might be lying. Previously, you might have thought Moiraine did send her, but here Moiraine says she did not send Varen, she did that on her own. Moiraine's language is pretty stark. So unless you think Moiraine is outright lying, there must be something up with Varen. Fans certainly theorized about how Varen might have twisted an offhand comment of Moiraine's enough to be able to allow her to say this without it being untrue. And even though we eventually learn that Varen can lie, I think there still might be some truth to that theory, because I think Varen is smart enough not to be caught in an unnecessary lie. And indeed, Moiraine does not at least outwardly jump to the conclusion that Varen lied. But it was very clever that Robert Jordan put these 2 statements in this book, because unless you were more suspicious of Moiraine, It would get you wondering about Varen's motivations, and it adds to the mystery of her character. The last little bits of foreshadowing fall in the little snippet of the cycle of the dragon from the fourth age at the very end. Let the prince of the morning sing to the land that green things will grow and the valleys give forth lambs. This references an enlightened post-Dragon Mount Rand who brings healing to the world because he is one with the land. A prime example of this being the Apple's first chapter in Towers of Midnight. Let the arm of the Lord of the Dawn shelter us from the dark. Notice the reference to a singular arm. Rand doesn't lose his entire arm, but I believe this still references the loss of his hand. And the great sword of justice defend us. Arthur Hawkwing's legendary sword is called Justice. Rand comes into possession of it later in the series, and he gifts it to his father in a sort of replacement for the sword of Tams that is lost here. And Rand actually recognizes the sword because of his memory of meeting Hawkwing here in Falme. Let's start with some key character moments for Rand. First, he thinks of Ingtar as a friend and doesn't care that he was a dark friend. Rand continues to care most about the people who are close to him. He tells Ba'alzamon he's not there for him, he is there for Egwene. Although he comes to realize it was not his place to save her. That was for others to do. Rand has gained certainty that he has never served the Shadow due to the visions he saw when he traveled by Portalstone. Now, Robert Jordan has said that there have been instances in other turnings where the dragon has gone over to the Shadow, but those instances resulted in a draw. Now, I think it's less important from a character development standpoint, the truth of that, because for Rand, it serves him here to believe that Ishamael is lying and that he has resisted the Shadow countless times before. And that last part is true. The confrontation between Rand and Moiraine is hugely important. He wants to deny needing her, and she wants to prove that he does and nudge him into admitting who he is. And I think she does achieve the latter, because even though we don't see it, we know that Rand accepts the allegiance of the Shienarans, and he stops denying that he is the Dragon Reborn. Moiraine has a hand in that decision, even though Rand might not be ready to admit that yet. But we see that when he comes to that decision, he is thinking about duty, and that's been another theme of this book. And we've seen how lessons from Lan and Ingtar and Hurin have also helped him along the way to get to that point. I would be remiss not to mention the moment where Rand lets go of the sword he got from Tam. He accepts at that moment that Tam was not his birth father, and that was essential to him accepting that he is the Dragon Reborn. But he also says it is like tearing his heart out, and it does not change the way he feels about Tam, nor should it. Tam is his father, and that never changes. There are a couple other character moments I want to mention, and the first is actually a Mat moment. As is typical for Mat in these early books, he does not cover himself in glory as a friend. He again mentions Rand going mad and not wanting to be around him if he does. But there is a moment where the real Mat does shine through a bit. And that's when he says that he will not leave Egwene to the Shan-Chan either, even though he hasn't seen her himself. He even says that saving Egwene is not wasting time. And this after Rand has reminded him of how crucial time is for Mat to get to Tar Valon and be severed from the dagger. So it's a small moment, easily missed, but the Mat we will come to know is in there. Finally, let's talk about the moment when Egwene and Min face off over Rand. We're not in Egwene's POV, but the difference between the two still seems pretty stark. Egwene has known who Rand is for this entire book, and she never seriously considers being with him anyway. Instead, she seems to try to convince herself that no one can be with him. And this is why she seems keen to impress that idea on Min. Min is not buying that argument. She probably knows it's not impossible to love Rand or to be with him, and she will go on to prove that. I don't blame Egwene for turning aside. She has another path to be on. I'm just pointing out that she doesn't seem ready to admit that she just doesn't love Rand in the way that she would need to in order to be with him. And I think she clings to the idea of it being impossible as a way of sort of maybe assuaging her own guilt over those feelings. Now, she considers Min for a long time and then she walks away. Again, we're not in her head. We don't know exactly what her thoughts are, but this seems pretty clearly to be a moment of decision, even if she doesn't quite realize that yet. I loved the symbolism of Matt and Perrin both being by Rand's side in this moment. Matt blowing the horn, Perrin waving the banner. It's the three ta'veren together, all of them essential, and the emphasis on Rand not being alone in his fight. In a similar way, I think when Rand thinks of Lan and of Ingtar and of Egwene, and it sort of helps him in that moment when he decides to sheathe the sword, which is what allows him to stop Ishamael here. Choice is another theme that I will return to. Min thinks to herself that she doesn't want to be a part of this, referring to Rand and loving him along with two others. And I think that's true. If you had just asked her, she would have said this is not what she wanted. At the same time, I think she is choosing it. She's not running away from what's in store, and she takes a sort of stand with Egwene that I think shows some more intention on her part than just being caught up in the pattern. The way I think about the pattern is that it selects people who are capable of doing what is needed. Min is capable of loving Rand as he needs to be. And so the pattern brought them together, and that's where the pattern interference comes in. But the fact that she can't help loving him, I think, has as much to do with what is in her own heart and his as it does with the pattern throwing them together. So Min also exemplifies to me a character that may be aware of how the pattern is weaving her, but instead of fighting it, finds a way to make the choices her own. She might grumble, but her actions say more than her words. I liked Brigitta laughing at Rand for always choosing women who cause him trouble. I could just imagine her making fun of him in a good-natured way. When Min is complaining about the pattern catching her up with Rand, she says, "Why couldn't I have something safe and simple like being shipwrecked with no food and a dozen hungry Aielmen?" She doesn't know a thing about Giotto yet, so she's being a little unfair to Aielmen, but I still love her sense of humor. Just like I love when she's complaining about how Rand is so big and tall as she's dragging him. She's a little bit like Matt in this way, where she grumbles but follows through. But probably the funniest moment was Rand thinking he had killed the Dark One this time with his sword. This is where the show might be able to shine even brighter, because imagine we get to cut to Moiraine's face after he says this. Real quick, I wanted to do a special shout out to an artist that I featured a number of times in this video, and I have in others as well. I know he watches the channel sometimes. He goes by M. Anderson on DeviantArt and Andrel's New Hobby on Instagram. He's been putting out a lot of new work recently. I really love it. You've got to check it out. Links are in the description. Thank you so much for tuning into this reread. I'll have an update for you soon on what's coming up next. And don't forget to leave me a comment and let me know your favorite parts of this ending. See you next time.